found unbelievable horrors on the internet that haunt me to this day. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a rush of icy air slammed against me, locking me in a grip of dread. My heart raced, matching the pulse of my swirling thoughts. Just an hour before, I was sprawled on the couch, my fingers gliding over my phone screen, laughing at memes and scrolling through videos. The world beyond my walls felt safe, small. But then curiosity took over. A click, a link, a warning I ignored. I stepped into a dark realm, a twisted part of the internet most dare not explore. My laptop screen cast an eerie glow, illuminating shadows that danced just beyond my vision. A throbbing pulse of static filled my ears, a cacophony of whispers that felt almost alive. My chest tightened with every new discovery. I stumbled upon videos of abandoned places, desolate and haunting, filled with echoes of the past. I could almost smell the dust, the decay clinging to the air like a shroud. Then came the stories. Stories of unsolved mysteries, of faces in the dark. Each narrative sent chills down my spine. The hairs on my neck stood on end as I read about unsettling figures lurking just beyond the camera frame, eyes glinting, watching, waiting. I felt tense, my breath quickening, every creak of my own house suddenly amplified. I was alone, but it felt like something was there with me, hanging on my every word, just waiting for the right moment to strike. But the worst part? The live streams. People broadcasting from desolate places, their phones capturing flickering shadows and strange noises. I held my breath, my pulse pounding in sync with the unsettling sound of a door creaking open. Although it was just the wind, or so I told myself. My fingertips trembled as I clicked on one video marked danger. The screen flickered, showing a crumbling house, its windows like hollow eyes. The air thickened with an electrifying fear. I could practically hear the heavy, uneven breath of something waiting inside. Suddenly, a loud banging echoed through the video, and my heart leapt. The figure appeared, half in shadow, creeping closer. My throat tightened. I could barely breathe. The video cut out, leaving only a black screen with the haunting echo of a scream that wasn't just in my head. What had I stumbled upon? A hidden world that thrived on terror? I could feel the weight of all I had seen pressing down on me, a suffocating blanket of dread. I looked around my dimly lit living room, the walls feeling like they were closing in as the shadows stirred. I took a shaky breath, the question gnawing at me. Have I unleashed something that shouldn't have been found? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the vibrations of dread wove into the fibers of my reality, the clamor of my pulse served as a grim metronome, echoing the encroaching darkness. I could hear my own breathing labored and shallow as I slowly turned away from the laptop, desperate to escape its haunting glow. But the air felt charged now, like a storm just beginning to brew, static crackling against my skin. The night stretched on, each minute laced with an anticipation that curdled in my stomach. Shadows flickered erratically across the walls, a dance of unease that seemed to mock my futile hope that I was merely imagining things. I blinked hard, convincing myself it was just the aftereffects of that cursed stream, the images too deeply imprinted in my psyche. I staggered toward the kitchen, searching for solace in the familiarity of cutting through vegetables or boiling water. Anything to shatter that lingering horror. The moment I stepped into the dimly lit kitchen, the fluorescent lights flickered ominously above, flickering in uneven intervals. I tried to remind myself that even in horror stories, appliances malfunctioned. Darkness seeped from crevices, the mundane turned monstrous. But with each flicker, the visions of the crumbling house and the shadow creeping closer replayed in my mind like a relentless loop. Then, I heard it. A soft scratching sound, persistent and rhythmic, emanating from the living room, a whisper of nails dragging across wood. My heart sank, frozen in place by the thought that I wasn't alone after all. A desperate instinct urged me to flee, but my feet felt rooted, as if the shadows clawed at my ankles, unwilling to let me go. Summoning what courage remained, I edged back into the living room. The laptop screen was still aglow, casting ghastly light across the room like a beacon for the horrors I hoped I had left behind. I looked for signs of disturbance. Was furniture displaced? Were there signs of a visit from something unspeakable? But there was nothing. The stark stillness wrapped tightly around me, and the scratching grew louder. I stepped forward, drawn to the source of the sound. My breath hitched as I approached the laptop. The screen displayed the last frame of that cursed video. A ghastly figure, its face obscured but those eyes dark, hungry pits staring back through the digital abyss, made my skin prickle. Just as I turned away, hoping to deny the ominous tension, the scratching morphed into a frenetic rhythm, a desperate clawing now, then silence. The complete absence of sound crashed upon me. I cast frantic glances, hoping for some glimpse of movement, but the air was thick, belly aching tight. My heart hammered in my ears, drowning out rational thoughts. I reached a trembling hand toward the laptop to close it, but without warning it shifted on its own, as if an unseen force was resisting any attempts at closure. My fingers were locked in horror, and just then, the door creaked, an awful, ghostly sound that resonated through the stillness of the house. I spun around, eyes wide and wild, meeting a chilling view. The living room doorway stood ajar, like a mouth poised to swallow me whole. I stared into the yawning darkness beyond, feeling something watching me from within, an unseen specter lining the edges of that threshold. It was then that I noticed it. A faint outline, barely visible, materializing slowly into view. Suddenly, without any provocation, the figure lunged forth, and before I could react, my phone chimed violently, shaking the very air around me. Heart racing, I glanced down. A message notification blared across the screen. "You're not alone anymore." And then the lights went out, plunging me into complete darkness, save for a dim ember from the laptop that flickered, the pale light revealing an abyss behind that door growing wider with the seconds. The sensation of breath upon my neck, a sigh, almost welcoming, sent me spiraling into a dizzying spiral of terror. Was I truly navigating through the mundane layers of reality, or had I slipped into something far more sinister, more perilous? I felt the phantom chill of a hand brushing against my shoulder and turned just in time to see nothing, only shadows shifting in the depths of the dark, laughter echoing faintly as if a twisted audience watched from the void. This was no mere interruption. This was the beginning of something grotesquely profound. And then, the door slammed open. I stood paralyzed in that suffocating darkness, my breath caught in my throat as the door swung wide open with a deafening crash. The laptop's weak light flickered ominously, illuminating a jagged silhouette now filling the doorway. I imagined it a creature born from pure dread, tendrils of shadows wrapping around it like mist, undulating and whispering threatening secrets. The air felt thick. Every breath I took clawed at my lungs, stinging with a metallic taste. I wanted to scream, but the sound roared in my chest, refusing to escape. Eyes wide, I searched the tangled black void beyond the threshold for any hint of its origin. My instincts screamed to escape, to flee, yet I remained rooted to the spot, spellbound by the growing darkness. The figure stepped inside, its presence distorting the light until the walls twisted and warped around it like old parchment caught in a storm. I could see it more clearly now, an amalgamation of darkness and anguish, hunched and almost human. I felt its gaze bore down on me, a heavy weight of malevolence that caused pain to throb in my chest. "I have come to claim what is mine," it rasped, words echoing like dry leaves tumbling through the abyss. Each syllable felt like ice trickling down my spine, crystallizing my fear into solid, unyielding terror. With each step it took, I felt the floor beneath me pulse, as though the house itself was alive and straining to expel this thing. Yet somehow, it was tethered here by some dark covenant. I darted my eyes around for an escape, but reality bent beneath the creature's influence, warping my familiar surroundings into a grotesque parody. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out, the question barely leaving my quivering lips. The thing paused, a momentary flicker of profound silence enveloping us, and it tilted its hedan unsettling mockery of curiosity. "You have looked into the shadows, and now they stare back. The truth you unearth comes with a price." And then, as swiftly as it materialized, the air surged like the tide, carrying with it an unsettling cacophonia discord of whispers, bolstered by gnashing teeth and wails that crescendoed into an overwhelming symphony of despair. I winced at the noise. It vibrated within my bones, seeping through the cracks in my composure. "Join us," it hissed, garbled and slippery, stretching its fingers towards me as if to weave a web of insatiable darkness. I could almost see thread-like trails of vapor rising from its fingertips, promising to entwine me into their madness. A primal instinct erupted from somewhere deep within me. A surge of defiance ignited the dark oil of fear. I spun toward the window, my only clear escape point, but the moment my hand brushed against the cool glass, it shattered into a myriad of shards that glistened like malicious stars. The floor beneath me trembled and crumbled, and I found myself swallowed by the abyssal depths pouring from the broken glass as I fell back toward it. A horrid, gravelly laugh enveloped me, curling around every shred of hope I had left, suffocating me in its grasp. The thing surged forward, the darkness spilling from it like a flood, consuming the fragments of light that remained. I could feel it entwining around me, a weight dragging me deeper, and it spoke Agar in a swift whisper that sliced through the bubbling chaos. "Time bends for those who dare." Suddenly, I was yanked back, pulled upright as if by invisible hands. I gasped for air, but the world around me had shifted. I was no longer trapped within my living room, but a nightmarish version of a toile stained dark with a grotesque form of decay, the remnants of my familiar life twisting into something incomprehensibly vile. And then, in the corner of my vision, I caught sight of my own Iona face contorted in horror, yet eyes gleaming with a sinister glee. Each heartbeat pounded louder in rhythm to the unfurling terror, drawing closer to an edge I couldn't identify. I stumbled backward, dread pooling in my throat as the truth hit me like an avalanche. There was something more terrifying waiting just outside the lines of sanity, and it had taken root inside me before I could scream. The lights flickered back to life, illuminating not the living room but the cavernous, putrid expanse of the dark void I had witnessed before. My laptop pulsed ominously, a siren call that promised knowledge yet screamed of dread. Compelled by a force stronger than fear itself, I heard a rustle behind me, a collective shuffling of twisted forms emerging from the shadows I once thought contained only myself. In that moment of existential crisis, brimming on the precipice of madness, realization dawned upon me I could not escape. As the lights dimmed once more, the creatures reached towards me, and from the depths of the abyss came a singular voice, layered in echoes both sweet and horrifying, whispering a fate I could scarcely comprehend. "Welcome home." And then, the walls began to close in. Frantic breaths escaped my lips as the creatures loomed closer, their features writhing, an amalgamation of faces stitched together by their collective suffering. I stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to retreat. The walls pressed in, slick and cold, squeezing the sanity from my mind. Each heartbeat was drowned by the chorus of whispers that thickened the air. They coiled around my thoughts, pulling me down into the depths of despair. I was trapped in a fever dream, lost in a nightmarish landscape that echoed back my inner turmoil. The shadows shifted at the edges of my vision. Disembodied limbs stretched towards me like branches of a gnarled tree, desperate to ensnare me in their malevolent embrace. Every fragmented scream and pitiful sob spiraled around me, a cacophony of torment that filled the hollow chambers of my soul. "Please," I cried out, a futile plea against the inexorable tide closing in. "What do you want from me?" The question seemed to linger, bouncing off the walls of this grotesque shrine to madness, but the answer drowned beneath the weight of their shared history: pain, betrayal, and a hunger for vengeance. "Your truth," they hissed in unison, the guttural sound vibrating through the air like a chime of cracked glass. "You have what we need." I recoiled at their collective gaze settling upon me, maddening and full of longing. Instinct birthed an unholy mix of terror and curiosity. "What truth?" My hands trembled, Shadows twisted around my fingers like fingertips beckoning me deeper into the abyss. Something inside me cracked, the barriers of my mind splintering under the pressure, allowing a memory to seep through the fractures, urging me to remember. Images raced through my thoughts, memories distorted by to me a fleeting glimpse of a time before the world turned dark, when laughter filled spaces where shadows now danced menacingly. It was my love, dancing in a golden light, eyes sparkling with promise. But then, like a film reel's transitioning from bright to dim, her laughter shattered, replaced by silence and emptiness. What had I sacrificed to uncover the darkness? I felt a desperate need to sever the connection binding me to them, a desperate pull to flee. I turned my back to the ghastly figures, desperately searching for any ounce of light, but every ray seemed dimmed by my own regret. The hallway stretched endlessly in front of me, and I started to run, the echoing whispers morphing into a singular, harrowing voice that coiled around my very essence. Run as you may, but the truth will find you. You sought the darkness, you opened the door. I propelled myself forward, stumbling down the corridor, only to crash into a door that loomed with an unsettling grandeur. It stood locked, its surface marred by countless indentations, as if hands had clawed it in desperate bids for release. I pounded on the wood, my own fists becoming red with frustration. The shadows swarmed around me, closing in like an impending storm, seeking to apprehend me for their own twisted purposes. In a fit of rage and desperation, I slammed my shoulder against the door, screaming as splinters dug into my skin. Suddenly, the wood gave way, bursting open, and I tumbled through the threshold into an icy expanse that mirrored the hall before me, yet twisted in a disquieting ballet of horror. In the center of the chamber, bathed in a pale blue glow, stood a panel, the laptop flickering defiantly, as though it had somehow breached the sanctity of this otherworldly realm. The faces of the tormented pressed against the walls, merging into the very fabric like ghostly wallpaper, their eyes pleading for deliverance one moment, then filled with malice the next. You must choose. The unsettling voice resonated through the space, now seemingly emanating from the laptop itself. Sacrifice what was lost or embrace the darkness within. One will free them, the other solidifies your place here. Words dripped with maleficence, resonating within the hollow of my chest as I hesitated. I was consumed by the weight of the decision before me. As I inched closer to the flickering light, shapes began to coalesce behind me. Whispers crescendoed into a wailing chorus, a harrowing reminder of what lay at stake. Just as my fingers grazed the surface of the screen, the laptop exploded in a burst of blinding light, engulfing everything in a sea of white. I stumbled back, blinking against the brilliance, but when my vision cleared, I found myself alone again in the suffocating darkness. Only this time, it wasn't the darkness creeping in. It was coming from within me. I gasped, a hand flying to my stomach, where something churned violently. From the depths of that hollow place inside, a face emerged, blurring my mind's eye with images of anguish and despair. It was her face, twisted in an expression of shock, smiling one moment then contorted into agony the next. "Help me," she screamed, but I felt the shadows spill out of me. They were Hermie love. My light turned to darkness. The walls shuddered as the weight of 1,000 souls pressed against me, and in that moment, I knew the horrifying truth that would haunt me forever. The darkness wanted to claim me, and my hands, they were not my own anymore. The oppressive darkness wrapped around me tighter, a living shroud pulsating with malignant intent. I stared, horrified, as my hands began to morph, the skin stretching and blending, merging with shadows that writhed like serpents across the floor, hungry for release. My heart raced, a frantic echo of survival thrumming through my veins, but the entity lurking within me ebbed away my strength, dragging me into its depths. I gasped, shaking my head wildly as the faces in the walls pressed on, their eyes filled with despair. "This isn't happening. I am not one of you." Yet with every denial, the chorus of screams grew louder, spiraling through my mind like a broken record, the fabric of my reality unraveling. The face of my love twisted in a macabre dance of torment and longing, merging with the mirage of fabricating darkness, calling to me like an echo from the void. I stumbled back, the shadows quivering as they recoiled from my sudden motion, feasting on my fear. "Embrace it," the unnerving voice screeched through the ether, ricocheting off the walls like a thunderclap. "You are one of us now. Your suffering is a part of the collective. Let go." I doubled over, clutching my stomach tight as if I could suppress the screams inside of me. Visions flashed before my Aisa roller coaster of past grievances intertwining with future horrors. I remembered the online forum where I first caught the fleeting whispers of the entity, a cursed link hidden behind a wall of innocuous web pages promising hidden truths about the universe's deepest fears. They had lured me in with the promise of power and knowledge. I was a moth to the flame, blind to the ashes I would become. As the realization of my foolishness twisted my gut, the shadows around me thickened, absorbing every ounce of light, turning the space into a chasm of despair. The faces began to scream, their cries overlapping into a cacophony of suffering that threatened to split my skull apart. I had opened the door to this, and maybe they were right. I had sought the darkness, driven by a need to confront my own demons. Then a chilling laughter erupted from nowhere and everywhere simultaneously, one that pierced through the veils of anguish and ice. I looked up to see a silhouette standing in sharp contrast against the suffocating blackness. It was a figure draped in a shroud of ash, its face obscured by an eerie glow radiating from within. Eyes opaque but alive with something that felt ancient and unspeakably malevolent. "The light you cherish is a lie, and the darkness you dread is your only salvation," it said, its voice slithering into my ears like 100 slithering snakes weaving a story of dread. "You were always meant to be part of this cycle, feeding the void." "Oh," I screamed, unaware of where my voice took form in this sprawling nightmare. "I won't be a puppet for you." With newfound urgency, I lunged toward the ghastly figure. But as my feet carried me forward, the shadows laughed, pulling back from my grasp and forming an impenetrable wall. My body struck an invisible barrier, and I crumpled to the ground, agony shooting through me as the walls closed in further, pressing on my lungs, choking me with every deep breath. The figure stepped forward, its presence a cascade of shadows shifting like liquid torment. I could feel its icy breath on my skin, a whisper of cold death that recoiled from my mere humanity. "Ah, but you will be part of the circle," it cooed softly, the compassion in its voice mingling with mockery. "The truth is a heavy price, and you will pay dearly, my dear." Before it could finish, the walls behind me exploded in a flurry of entwined limbs and screaming faces, and I thought I would be swallowed whole by the writhing tide. But I caught a glimpse of something within the throng, a familiar spark of golden light. I lunged toward it, hope igniting my heart, and in an instant, I was ensnared in 1,000 arms, a myriad of ghostly pleas wrapping around me, each insisting on their story to be heard, each soul begging for salvation. And yet, all the voices screamed one word with desperation: "Help! Help! Help!" Just as I felt the grip of their torment tighten, a thunderous crack split the air and the ground began to quake beneath me. The entity roared in fury, the walls crumbling, shadows twisting out of shape as I ceased to exist as a singular being, swallowed by the cacophony. The brightness widened. I could feel the light pushing against me, aching to break through the horror that veiled my heart. And then, silence fell, the tornado of despair halting abruptly to end that eerie stillness. The darkness withdrew slightly, revealing a path forward, a glowing corridor that twisted away from the remnants of anguish. Yet, something was off. A single, tiny laugh echoed in the aftermath. Soft, sweet, unmistakably familiar help meth voice was hers, the light of my life, begging me once more. But at what cost did I seek redemption from that corridor? As I took a step forward, feeling compelled yet terrified, the shadows seemed to breathe in anticipation. And as I connected with what lay ahead, the floor hesitated, quivering beneath my feet as if it were waiting to unearth a harrowing secret. Suddenly, the ground beneath me gave way, and I plummeted into darkness. My last whisper fading into the abyss. "Where are you?" The impact was unsettling. I landed on a surface that felt like flesh, pulsing and shifting beneath me. A shock traveled through my body, a visceral reminder of the darkness still lurking just beyond the reach of my senses. Instinctively, I scrambled to my feet, but the ground beneath me twisted, making each movement a struggle against an unseen force. Where am I? I gasped into the silence, my voice swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere surrounding me. The air felt thick, imbued with an ancient sorrow that seeped into my skin. I squinted against the dim light flickering like a dying flame in the distance. Before me stretched an expansive chamber, cavernous and chilling, the walls shimmering with a moisture that resembled tears. I took a tentative step forward, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, yet an unyielding pull urged me onward, deeper into the malevolence. Glimpses of movement flickered through the corners of my Visiona, shadow darting just out of sight, lingering whispers promising solace. But I couldn't stop. I had to find her. The corridor twisted endlessly, revealing murals etched in agony on the walls, twisted faces frozen in fear, pleading eyes locked in a silent scream. The deeper I ventured, the more the imagery morphed, becoming a frenzied display of despair that gnawed at my sanity. I swiped a hand along the damp surface of the wall, and a wet, metallic substance clung to my skin. It smelled of rust and decay, sending jolts of revulsion up my spine. "Help me," her voice again, a haunting echo wrapping around my heart, igniting a flicker of hope amidst the despair. I quickened my pace, pushing through the fountaining dread, yearning to catch a glimpse of her familiar form. And then, as I neared the cavern's end, an ominous shape materialized, a door, looming and wrought iron, etched with symbols that squirmed like living creatures. It stood ajar, revealing a faint glimmer of warmth within, almost inviting yet laced with the tension of the unknown. With trepidation, I shoved the door open, metal creaking in protest. A gasp escaped my lips at the sight that awaited me. The room was illuminated by a flickering fire, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Where bones served as grim furniture, the remnants of souls lost to this forsaken place. In the center, a crude altar arose, piled high with offerings, trinkets of forgotten memories, remnants of lives lived but severed too soon. And upon that altar, a thin, spectral figure knelt, surrounded by spirals of luminous fog, the essence of lost spirits weaving in and out around her. Is it really you? My heart thudded painfully, the weight of longing threatening to crush me beneath its burden. She looked up, her eyes hollow but shimmering with recognition. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered, voice soft as a breeze yet taut with an urgency that sent chills racing down my spine. "You have to leave before it's too late." "You need help," I urged, fighting against the horror sucking the air from the room. I reached out, desperate for connection, the warmth radiating off the altar inviting me to step closer, to break the barrier of living and dead. "Stay back." She lunged, but it was too late. My feet faltered, and before I could comprehend the danger, a pull seized me, dragging me toward the altar. Whispers swarmed around me, desperate pleas flooding my mind. A collective symphony of anguish. "Oh!" I yelled, but it was swallowed by the languid rise of shadows, vines of darkness encircling my limbs, squeezing with suffocating grip. "Let me go!" The shadows entwined me tighter, and then reality shattered like glass. The altar erupted into a swirling cyclone of light and darkness, her silhouette shifting in and out of view, flaring like the last breath of a dying star. I could see her mouth moving, words lost to the chaos swirling around us. "You're not Saphir," she gasped before the light consumed her, and she vanished behind a veil of shadow. A guttural laugh, deep and resonant, reverberated through the room. The ground convulsed beneath me, echoing a race of thundering footsteps dread. Closing eye in the distance, shadows erupted, writhing into monstrous forms cloaked in despair, converging on me, their hollow eyes gleaming with unholy delight. "Your choice has sealed your fate," they whispered in unison, a cold breath of death that threatened to wrap around my throat. Terror seized me, propelling me into a frenzied flight. I spun back toward the door, but my path closed off, the way swallowed by a spiraling doom. The walls pulsed, breathing with the agony of those before me, their pain a tangible thread weaving through the air, binding me to their tragic fate. Just as despair clawed at my throat, the door exploded outward, revealing a maddening whirlwind of light and dark, each entity howling in fury as I staggered back, teetering on the precipice of an unknown abyss, and then, as if responding to my silent plea, the darkness flickered, and in that fleeting moment of clarity, I caught sight of her face. Again anguished and clear, emerging from the chaos. Find me with that. The shadows lunged forward, sipping at the edges of my sanity, leaving me alone with one final decision. What could I become if I stepped into that swirling storm? Would it lead to redemption or doom? As I hovered on the brink, the air thickened, and the whispers crescendoed, chilling truth breaking through the sound, only one will return. And suddenly, everything spiraled into oblivion, the chamber collapsing around me as I plunged deeper into darkness. The last echo of her voice consumed by the gale helped me. The suffocating darkness enveloped me, a heavy blanket weighing on my chest. I fell through an abyss, spiraling downwards through the very essence of sorrow and despair that seemed to throb with life. Panic clawed at my insides. Was I falling into nothingness or merely into the depths of this wretched realm? A chill skittered down my spine, laced with the haunting realization that I wasn't alone. Whispers crept into my ears, like slithering snakes of sound, coiling around my thoughts and tightening their grip. Each voice begged for attention, a symphony of anguish that resonated with eeriness. Help me. Find me. Don't leave. The cacophony twisted and shifted, morphing familiar intonations into something grotesquely foreign. I felt colors bleeding into existence around me, a sickly green void punctuated by flickering images, remnants of the past clawing their way to the surface. Then, a spark of illumination ignited, momentarily blinding me. As the brightness dimmed, I found myself on a cobbled path, drenched in an unsettling twilight, where the horizon curled like a serpent devouring its own tail. Shadows twisted and morphed into sinister silhouettes, their gaping mouths screaming with no sound. I could hardly breathe with the weight of dread settling in my bones. Desperate to find my bearings, I pressed a hand against the damp, cold stone wall, seeking the warmth of life I had clung to just moments before. But as I turned, I realized the wall was not merely stone. It throbbed like a living heartbeat beneath my touch, warm yet sickeningly pulsing in a rhythm that synchronized with my own racing heart. "Where are you?" I cried, voice trembling. The echoes of my despair merged with the cries of others, the air thick with the taste of longing and decay, pungent and nauseating with each step. The atmosphere became laden, as if the air itself mourned the terrible past etched into every surface. I pressed forward, crossing darkened thresholds where flickering shapes lingered on the periphery, just beyond my line of sight, their gestures frantic as they tried to relay their unfinished stories. "Leave while you still can," a voice murmured to me, a sharp contrast to the wails surrounding me. Somewhere between a memory and a warning, it reverberated in my skull. I turned, but there was no thing, a shifting mass of smoke and despair in the place where it had momentarily flickered to life. Suddenly, my breath hitched as I faced an altar, a more grotesque replication of the one from before. It was grayed and cracked, adorned with the features of faces twisted in horror, eyes wide and devoid of life. A poignant agony hung in the air, and at its center lay a dagger, its blade shimmering ominously, catching the dying light with a dangerous allure, and no longer able to ignore its seduction. I stepped forward, drawn by the promise of something less than death. The moment my fingers brushed against the hilt, a searing pain shot through me. I gasped, the energy pulsating through the metal leaping into my veins, igniting a deep, awakened hunger that ignited terror in the distance. I heard her voice again, clearer this time, a beacon through the nightmare. "Help me, for the love of God, find me." The urgency carved through the despair surrounding me, compelling me to listen, to act. Suddenly, the shadows shrieked as I stood paralyzed with the dagger in my grip. They twisted violently before coalescing into an abomination with clawed limbs and a gaping maw, eyes glacial and malevolent. "You've made your choice," it hissed, its voice an eerie blend of caresses and threats. "But know this, every gift demands a price." The creature lunged forward, and instinct drowned my lingering emotion as I hurled the dagger through the air. Time slowed as it spiraled towards the beast, my heart racing with dread and resolve. Just before impact, the dagger exploded in a blinding flash of light. Silence. The air grew still, and my heart pounded loudly in the subsequent quiet. a deafening drumbeat against the stillness. Yet, as the darkness retracted, revealing a bright corridor, I felt a flutter. At the back of my Mindan insidious whisper breaking through, only one will return as shadows twisted back into the ether. I saw her face, framed by a brilliant luminescence. Yet her expression was not one of hope or freedom. It was one of trembling fear. "What did you do?" Her voice faded into a sharp howl as the light warped, pulling her toward a misbegotten fate I could not understand. "I'll save you," I screamed, rushing forward, but the shockwaves surged, flinging me to the ground as reality dissolved into chaos once more. The shadows roared back to life, a scalding mass coalescing with renewed fury. And in that moment of horror, a revelation struck, a chilling clarity about the bargain I had unwittingly made. All the lost souls watched in eerie silence as the shadows hissed, coiling closer, encircling me in an inexorable embrace. Only one will return, and in that dreadful instant, everything converged. The fire from the altar flickered close, and the whispers transformed into a dark chant. Choose. As the shadows closed in, the walls of my own torment echoed with one last, agonizing cry, a desperate trace of her voice, consumed within a surge of overwhelming darkness. And I understood, with sickening clarity, that the shadows could devour more than flesh, that they craved a piece of my very soul. But I wasn't alone in this vivisection of choice. Something else had awoken, tapping into my desperate heart. I encroached upon sanity's brink, as the final echo of fading hope urged me onward, spiraling into that dark invitation. Would I choose to grasp the light or let the shadows claim me? The darkness pressed around my throat, and I knew the answer was closer than I liked. Help me, and my very essence trembled with the dawning realization that choice was never mine to begin with. I staggered, the weight of every ghostly plea crushing down upon me. The faces of the damned flickered in the shifting shadows, contorted in eternal despair, and I realized the extent of their suffering. They were not merely reflections of lost souls. They were fragments of a larger horror, the pieces of a dark tapestry woven by an unseen force that delighted in our misery. Only one will return. The whisper slithered through the air once more, curling around my mind like the tendrils of smoke that engulfed the ground. The echo of that ominous statement reverberated within me, morphing into a sinister lullaby that entranced and terrified simultaneously. In a moment of misguided clarity, I turned to face the altar, the warm pulse of the dagger still coursing through my veins. It played a haunting melody at the back of my thoughts, urging me to seize the power it offered. What would it mean to conquer the darkness? To command the anguish wrapped around these tortured souls? But as I battled my conflicted desires, the shadows lurched forward, as if responding to my doubts. Choose, they hissed, their voices blending into a single, haunting chorus. In the encroaching dark, faces emerged, a tide of phantoms, each contorted in an expression of pleading. My heart pounded within my chest as I recognized them. Each one had a name, a story half told, trapped in this liminal abyss where reality and horror intermingled. "Don't abandon us," a faceless figure wailed, and the cacophony grew louder, swirling around my consciousness, each shriek an unbearable weight. With trembling hands, I clutched the dagger closer, feeling its forbidden warmth seep deeper into my skin. The creature's promise echoed in my thoughts. What if I could wield it? Navigate this sinister maze? Perhaps I could save them, or at the very least save myself. "You must help them," I murmured, my voice cracking under the pressure of impending dread. But the moment I uttered the words, a dreadful laugh erupted from the darkness, a cacophony of rasping breaths and jagged mirth. "Foolish child, your heart is a banquet for the lost." The shadows coiled tighter, and for the first time, I felt their icy grip against my throat. "We have no bargains to make. Your salvation lies with us." Desperation clung to my every thought. I could sense the heat of panic rising as the darkness thickened around me. My mind raced. What if I could find the one who reached out to me? The one who called my name? "Do not dare." The shadows shrieked as I stepped backwards, trying to thread hope between the encroaching horror. A vision danced in my mind, her face, soft yet haunting, framed against the abyss. I could not lose her. Let her go. I screamed at the dark mass, straining against the tendrils of despair that threatened to pull me under. The shadows writhed, and for an instant, I thought I saw her outline shimmering just beyond reach as if the light reflected a truth. But the darkness fought back, launching a wave of icy wind that struck me full in the face, dragging me to my knees. "She is gone. Sacrificed to your greed," they crooned. An invincible rage surged within me, igniting a fire that pulsated all around. And in an instant, I thrust the dagger into the ground, the blade plunging deep with a resonance that sent tremors through the air. The shadows recoiled, and a surge of power flowed from the dagger, illuminating the darkness briefly before the shadows retaliated. Launching forward as a throng of claws and gnashing teeth, "I will not succumb," I screamed, feeling every ounce of loss surge inside me, fueling the desperate spark of resistance. The energy from the dagger swirled, encircling me, becoming a brilliant shield against the tide of despair. But just as the shadows loosened their grip, I saw a true horror unveiled before my eyes. Out of the maw of the darkness, beyond the flickering, agonized faces, emerged a being of unspeakable dread, a titanic figure, clothed in shadows woven with sinew and grief that rolled across its form like an eternal shroud. "Now you will know true loss," it rumbled, and the ground trembled beneath its weight, a presence beyond the realm of my understanding, unfurling before me like a storm that sought not just my flesh, but my very essence. And there, atop the altar, bloodied and broken, I saw her once more, eyes wide and pleading. Yet beneath the flickering light of hope danced terror, a realization dawning in her gaze. "Whatever you do," she whispered, her voice trembling, yet somehow a tether amidst the chaos. "Don't trust them." But the darkness howled back, and suddenly, I was no longer a spectator but a player in a horrific game I could not comprehend, with the stakes bartered upon my soul. In an earth-shattering moment of terror, the weight of choice pressed heavier than ever, strangling the breath from my lungs and leaving me gasping in the annihilating grip of fear. The shadows surged, ready to claim me as the cliffs of my decision loomed ever closer, tearing apart the fragile threads of hope. Only one will return, and as I plunged into the abyss of eternally lost souls, one truth echoed through the bloodlust of this nightmare. The choice was never truly mine, and time would punish us all. I was drawn into the shadow's maw, and the chilling darkness swallowed my scream whole. The world shifted, spinning out of control as I fell through the shadows, a chaotic vortex of despair. I was lost within the abyss, broken and disoriented, and the echo of her warning clung to my mind like a drowning man clings to a fleeting breath. "Don't trust them," I recited in a desperate whisper, though even I could hear the doubt creeping into my tone. The weight of darkness around me pulsated with every heartbeat. It was both a living entity and a prison, wrapping around me with sticky dread. I could no longer tell which way was up. Reality shifted like a mirage, distant and unattainable. Faces appeared, swirling in the gloom, a medley of fear, torment, and betrayal. I reached for them, pleading silently, but they melted away like smoke, the moment my fingers brushed the chill of their essence. And then I heard it, the soft sound of weeping, a chilling melody in this nightmarish landscape. It beckoned me through the shadows, each sob forming a path that twisted deeper downwards. I hesitated, heart pounding, instinct screaming at me to turn back. But hope, fragile as it was, pushed me forward. Could it be her? Could that sweet, haunting sound belong to my beloved? I had to know. "Can you hear me?" I shouted into the oppressive void, my voice swallowed by shadows. "I'm coming." There was a shift in the air, a sudden stillness that felt as if the whole realm held its breath. The weeping turned electric, reverberating with a new intensity, morphing into anguished screams as though my desperate cry had awakened something deep within the abyss. Shadows thickened, clustering together an assembly of bitterness, a congregation rising from the dark. "Fool, you are too late," a voice sneered, dragging itself across the ground like a slimy serpent. I felt it slither down my spine, biting into my fear. "You seek to save her, yet you plunge deeper into our domain." The walls around me began to pulse, as if the darkness was alive and undulating, shifting its shape with unsettling fluidity. I fought against the urge to flee, but forward I pushed, through the encroaching tide that sought to paralyze me with fear. And as I moved, bone-chilling laughter erupted all around me, splintering into echoes that stung my ears. Suddenly, a horrific visage broke through the Shadowsa mass of twisted limbs and gaping mouths, sunken eyes lit with malice. It lunged forward, clutching at my throat with a gnarled hand. "You think you can save her?" it rasped. "We revel in your pain," I gasped, the thick grip of despair tightening around me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. In that moment, a vision burst forth, crystal clear like lightning illuminating a dark night. Her face, filled with terror, pleading for release. "If you want her back, you must understand the price." The voice taunted, slithering through my mind, corrupting my thoughts, wrapping tighter around my heart. "She has already given the ultimate sacrifice in exchange for your freedom." "No, no," I shouted, fueled by the denial of a truth that gnawed at my sanity. I stopped, rooted in place as dread seeped deeper into my bones. "I will get her back." "Will you?" The shadows hissed, laughter echoing back as they expanded, and once more the vision shifted. I could see them, the silhouettes of others like me, suspended in their own nightmares, forever grappling with the shadows clawing at their hearts. "You may save her, or perhaps another shall take her place. That is the weight of your choice." That a sickening realization grounded my resolve. This place was not merely a prison for souls, but a tragic auction of despair. How many had come before me, driven by love or hubris to barter their suffering? How many had willingly sacrificed themselves to be free of this horror only to find, instead, another trap waiting in the dark? As I felt the anger ignite within me, a storm rising against the darkness, the shadows recoiled, whispering incoherently, as if they were losing their grip on me. But then, enfolding me like a shroud, something wrenched at the core of my being, the dagger still buried deep in the ground, calling for blood, commanding my will to know. I screamed, looking down as the dagger itself began to pulse, rattling with sinister energy. It throbbed with a hunger I could almost taste, blending my desperation with the promise of power that radiated from its gleaming edge, and just then, a scream shattered everything. The unmistakable voice of my beloved raw and echoing through the void. "Help me!" It was a cry that ignited every fiber of my being, and in that moment, the world tilt-eta decision overshadowed with impending doom. I reached for the dagger, a rush of energy drawing me inexorably toward it, igniting my heart with a terrifying possibility. Would I be the one? Could I risk it all for her life? As I grasped the hilt, the shadows howled in fury, plunging the darkness into a maelstrom of terror. I could feel the full weight of their wrath descending upon me. "Only one will return." That dreadful refrain crescendoed in ominous harmony as the darkness converged around me in a final onslaught, devouring me whole as my screams melded onto the paralyzing silence. And then, in the unending black, I felt the unmistakable tug of her spirit reaching out, a last vestige of hope slipping further into despair, giving me one final chance to either save her or seal my own fate in this unending nightmare. But as I prepared to make my choice, the ground beneath me trembled violently, cracking open like the maw of a behemoth, revealing an even deeper horror that had been waiting. I fell through an endless chasm, swallowed whole by the horror that lay beneath the surface of all I had known. The darkness grasped at me like seeking fingers, trying to pull me into its interminable void where light could not penetrate. As I plummeted deeper, the whispers of lost souls echoed all around, their cries weaving through the fabric of my panic. Their desperate cries of anguish clawed at my mind, merging with haunting memories of my beloved, her face flickering like a candle in the darkness. "Help me," her voice, a bittersweet melody that hung in the air like a fog. I clung to it, determined to make my way back to her, back to safety. I could not abandon her. But the shadows corroded my resolve. They promised power, knowledge, the means to save her. And as my descent slowed, I was pulled into an expansive cavern, illuminated by a glimmering pool that pulsed with an otherworldly light. The pool swirled with shapes, faces I recognized, souls trapped by the darkness, almost as if they were submerged. Panic washed over me. "No!" I shouted, reaching out, desperate to grasp their hands, to pull them to safety. Their hollow eyes gazed back at me, mouths opening and closing, soundlessly pleading for release. But as I lunged toward them, the scene warped, twisting into an illusioning, enticing vision of what I could achieve if I embraced the shadows that beckoned me. "Join us," they whispered, their voices a seductive chant. "Trade your pain, your sacrifice, for power beyond measure." Every utterance labeled my burden, outlined the weight that existed in the depth of my soul. Would they really set me free, or merely bind me tighter within these chains of despair? And amid the cacophony, her voice broke through. "Don't trust them." Her words echoed, sharper than any blade. Realization struck like a bolt of lightning, igniting the darkness. If I chose the power promised, wasn't that exactly what had cost her life? The dagger, the entity in my hand, called for blood. But what if the blood was mine? What would that awaken? In that instant I knew the truth. I could feel the shadows writhe around me, hungry for my sacrifice. They had taken her. They wanted me now, but I refused to be their pawn. "No," I gasped, pulling back from the brink of temptation. In that moment of defiance, I yanked the dagger from the ground, my fingers blistered by the energy coursing through it, but I would wield it not as a weapon against others. Instead, it became a sword of truth as I thrust the dagger into the pulsing pool. An electrifying jolt surged back at me, shattering the illusions. I felt the darkness warp around me, pulling away as if it could not abide the light of my resolve. The screaming shadows recoiled, twisting and writhing against the aura of hope I ignited. "Release my beloved," I roared, voice rising above the shrieks. With each word, I forced the dagger deeper, channeling every ounce of love and anguish torn from my heart. The faces within the pool screamed, trapped in their own webs of torment, and their voices morphed into a singular, overwhelming roar that rattled the cavern walls. A blinding flash erupted from the pool, and time slowed as the cavern trembled, as if the very world was collapsing into itself. The faces in the pool merged into a singular vortex, distorting into a final, horrid visage before it burst apart in a torrent of anguished wails, spirits released yet still bound by the fate of this darkness. And then, amongst the chaos, I felt Hermie beloved tumbling back into existence, her silhouette emerging from the crushing shadows. "You found me," she whispered, eyes gleaming with the echo of light I had fought to reclaim. But I also saw the flicker of fear in her gaze. Before I could grasp her hand and pull her into the light, the shadows writhed once more, an angry tide surging against my fragile victory. "Only one will return," the haunting refrain trembled through the atmosphere, twisting deep within the recesses of my mind. That I turned to face the oncoming darkness, and for a fleeting moment, I felt oppression dissipate around me as hope surged in my heart. But as I glanced back to my beloved, her expression twisted from joy to horror as something pulsed beneath the surface, something lurking in the depths of the dark, entwined with our fate. "Oh!" I screamed, just as the shadows merged into a colossal entity, a being of pure anguish. Its eyes glowed with malevolence, and the ground shook as it stretched out a shadowy hand to her, a talon that roared with appetite. "She belongs to me, a debt unfulfilled, a price to be paid. Run!" I cried, shoving her away as I faced the looming terror. With every ounce of strength bubbling within me, I plunged the dagger deep into my heart, a desperate hope that the act itself would sever the bond and shatter this cycle. The light blazed, wrestling back against the horrifying darkness. Time twisted anew. Everything erupted into chaos. The cavern began to collapse, shadows took form, and ghosts roared with longing. But I held the dagger steady, unleashing a torrent of radiant energy. The entity roared, the ground splitting beneath it, and desperately I turned to her one last time. "Hold on," I shouted, pushing through the searing pain as darkness fought back with brute force. The light grew brighter, my love extending her hand, embracing the hope I offered. And in that final moment, I realized my sacrifice did not extinguish light, but multiplied it. The poise between life and death split, and a crack ran through the darkness. The light surged forth, swallowing everything, dissolving the shadows that clawed at us. I felt her warmth intertwining with mine once more, and then silence fell. I opened my eyes, trembling and blind in bright light. As I adjusted, My heart raced at the visage before me battered, bruised, yet undeniably alive was my beloved. But amidst the relief, the weight of reality anchored itself in my mind. Had I vanquished the darkness, or merely opened another door? As we staggered back, the darkness shifted and twisted, now a veil lingering just beyond reach. "You cannot be free," a whisper crawled forth from the depths, and with dread, I turned back to where the gaping void lingered at the edge of our escape. "Only one will return," it hissed, a chilling reminder waiting, preparing to endure, whispering from shadows that now danced at the corner of my vision. I clutched my beloved close, hoping against hope that we had truly escaped. But the truth settled cold upon my chest. Our world was now tainted with what we had unleashed. And as the dark stretch of the abyss beckoned, I realized too late that even if I might hold her again, something sinister had returned with us, its insatiable hunger lurking just beyond the veil. The last echo rang in my mind, a chilling crescendo that would haunt my nights indefinitely. "You opened the door."